Is crowdfunding any good, or is it just a bunch of scammers taking money from trusting people? Crowdfunding offers a great way for innovators, entrepreneurs and engineers to create new products and get them out to the market. There's been some fabulous successes. Pebble Watch in 2014 raised $10 million and really launched that whole product category of the smartwatch. Also, Ethereum raised $18 million in 2014, and also that year was the Coolest Cooler, which raised $13 million. In fact, I backed a game called Exploding Kittens, which we still have and we play sometimes. You don't have to do much in terms of searching on the internet to find many successful crowdfunding campaigns. I'll put a link in the description to some. Equally, you don't have to search very far to find many unsuccessful crowdfunding campaigns. And some of them are millions of dollars that were raised, and many people didn't get product or had very poor experiences with the product that they received. So what could you do to avoid being scammed or to pick a winner when it comes to crowdfunding? Well, we've created top 10 tips in a document linked into the description here, which you can download and review. But in order to make that real, I'm going to analyze a video which was just released about an e-bike called Revo, a fascinating design bike, probably one of the most innovative I have seen. Unfortunately, this has not been a successful crowdfunding campaign, and there's many backers who are now out of pocket or very disappointed with the product. Yeah, so Indiegogo is one of the main crowdfunding platforms for hardware products, and there's lots of bike product on there. What is amazing about this bike is they are using something completely different for the wheel structure. The tire is part of a cylinder, is put on the outside of a cylinder, and there's a bunch of bearings inside there. A big departure from anything that you would have seen in the bike industry, and he gets into this in the video. He does a pretty good job, I think, riding this bike and showing us good and the bad of this bike. And of course, Revo raised a lot of money, as he points to, and delivered very few products. So this is not looking good for this product.
Clearly the thing looks insane. The wheel is just this big open hubless donut, but there's a reason most bicycles have hubs. It's really hard to do, and they had to make a lot of sacrifices to make the Revo hubless. And apparently people were not very happy with it. It wasn't a very good bike. What went wrong with their Indiegogo campaign? Now, as you can see, they spared no expense on this promotional video. This guy uses the fingerprint scanner to secure his Revo at a cafe, only to get a tamper notification initiated by a woman admiring his Revo.
They bring that whole idea of a whole female-male interaction thing. It's a little over the top. You know, that's, how often is that going to ever happen? I mean, it's a totally manufactured idea, trying to make men sort of engage with this product as if it's going to attract women or something. I think that's kind of a little bit of I wouldn't say a red flag, but an orange flag here.
They then make a bunch of claims about the bike, like how smooth it rides and how revolutionary the pedal assist is, and they ask you to join the Revolution, and join they did. But that was almost 5 years ago. Today, the comment section's full of would-be customers desperately trying to contact Revo, and if you visit Revo's social pages, it's just more of the same. But their website is truly damning, a GoDaddy parking page. That's an obituary if I've ever seen one. So what happened here? Well, let's get to know the Revo and we'll find out.
Yeah, this is really interesting that not only there were a lot of complaints, but there's also no website, there's no contact, there's no people, there's no one to talk to. And so it looks like the company has abandoned this project and left their backers essentially in the lurch.
So right now the motor is not...
I think one of the really telling things right here is just the noise that this thing makes. And the noise is coming not only from the motor, which I think you can hear, but also there's a whole load of wheels around the rim for the tire to run on, and they're really noisy. Compared to the silence of a hub, this is really unappealing.
Right now the motor is not on, and with great difficulty I am pedaling it. Can you believe how loud it is?
And how hard he has to pedal here too, because he's overcoming all the drag of all those multiple wheels behind or between the tire and the rim.
The second you start pedaling this thing, you start noticing a lot of stuff, and I'm gonna try and break it down. Let's start with the wheels, because I think that's a lot of where it's stemming from. Any bike, even e-bikes, they just roll, right? As soon as you stop pedaling, it just rolls on forever. It's like gliding. You just feel the resistance every step of the way on this thing, whether or not you're pedaling. Look at this.
Terrible.
I don't know if you've ever spun a normal bike wheel, but it's very much unlike that. A normal bike wheel has spokes, and then there's a hub in the middle, and that hub is extremely reliable. They haven't changed much in 100 years, and a modern hub you can restore to like new condition for $1. They just take these little bearings that you can pop in. This has, I don't know.
If you've ever picked up a wheel and spun the wheel, it will run just by itself so easily for so long, and a very well balanced wheel will run there by itself. I'm not going to say how long, because it depends on the weight of the wheel and a whole lot of things, but it'll definitely run. And I mean, there's kind of red flags with this whole thing. I mean, we like innovation, but it seems like it's going in the wrong direction. It's almost like a backward step.
Has, I don't know, a bearing the entire way around, and so there's a lot more resistance, and I suspect you can't service it because they don't sell parts for it. The company doesn't exist anymore, and it's not like you could rob some parts off another hubless wheel. And so let this sink in. The entire premise of the Revo hubless bicycle is that it lacks one of the most reliable moving parts ever made. Certainly one of the most reliable moving parts on a modern bicycle. And in its place, they replaced it with an unserviceable, heavy, complicated, and noisy hubless wheel. Yet, they're making the claim that this bicycle is revolutionary, that it's got a really smart pedal assist, and that it's really smooth. They even advertise its lightweight core. This is one of the heaviest bicycles I've ever picked up in my life. They say it's like 70-something pounds. I think it's heavier. Underneath this big plastic...
Over there, I think he makes a really good point, but I think it's worth stressing that some things just work really well. The hub and the wheel are things that work really well, and it's sometimes very, very difficult to innovate away from that to something better. And I think these guys have tried to innovate away from that, but they really haven't made anything better. He talks a little bit about features later on that might be suitable for this, but boy, the trade-offs just are so negative.
Plastic clamshell is likely just big solid pieces of aluminum and steel. Maybe we'll take it apart later and find that out. But we've got a lot to cover before then, because I haven't even registered the fingerprint scanner or any of the security features they advertised. So I'm downloading the Revo app, which still exists because this thing has a whole bunch of features. For example, in here, it's supposed to have a SIM card slot so you can GPS track the thing. There is a built-in fingerprint scanner up here that secures the bike. And if you lock it with the fingerprint scanner, there's supposed to be a wheel lock back here that keeps the bike from going. And so I want to be able to use all that. It's asking me to register a new bike. And so let's see how that works. I think we might actually be able to get this app to work. 1111.
Not connecting.
All right, the instruction manual gave me a default pairing code. I'm using that. I'm looking on Reddit threads, and I can't get this thing paired. And so we're off to a great start. Now, normally I'd say this is no problem because most electric bicycles have a little display screen that tells you how much battery you have left, how fast you're going, what assist mode you're in. But on the Revo, because it's high tech, they want you to use your smartphone. Everybody loves that. And as you can see here, they give you some adhesive to attach your smartphone to the handlebars. So the phone's all mounted to the handlebars. We got the Revo app running. Let's start talking about how this thing actually functions as a bike. And one of the first things you're gonna notice when you start riding it after you've absorbed the noise and the terrible ride is how hard it is to stop. I'm gonna go a reasonable speed down this bridge, and I'm gonna start applying my brakes right here. Let's see how long it takes me to stop.
Yeah. Let's go back over that tech. A lot of that tech is actually not that difficult, and it's starting to appear in many, many bikes. Fingerprint sensors kind of off the shelf. We can build apps fairly cheaply. Those sorts of features aren't really a big deal for e-bikes now. They're starting to come out with those. The big deal is the wheels, and they seem to be failing really badly. And he talks a little bit about the brakes here now, which is interesting.
That was a full-on emergency stop. I had both of my entire hands on the brake levers, gripping them as hard as I could, and it could barely stop the bike. That's really alarming. And given the weight of the bike and the airless tires and just all the sketchiness, it has no business going this fast with brakes like this. Brakes.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So we were involved in building, designing bikes some years ago, and some of ours were quite heavy, not quite as heavy as that. But one of the things that we invested in was a really good brake system. So very large discs on the disc brakes and powerful hydraulic brakes to stop those big wheels and that weight. Now he's got cable rim discs. I'm not opposed to those, but they really are something that was popular 20 years ago, and they have problems in that they get dirt and those pads can get overheated in long rides downhill. And in this case, they're just not powerful enough to stop that heavy bike with that rim on them. Everybody's moved away to disc brakes with hydraulics. I mean, really, there's nothing else that would substitute for that. Or some of the racing bikes, like very light racing bikes, still use this kind of technique because of the lightweightness of it, and having that, you're on the road, so you don't have to worry about dirt getting between the pads, but also the amount of torque you can apply out at that distance from the axle.
Like this. Brakes are effectively the most important safety feature on any bicycle, let alone an e-bike that weighs 70 pounds. That $200 bike I bought on Amazon had pretty decent brakes actually. They were cable actuated disc brakes. This doesn't have a hub, and so it can't have rotors, and so can't have disc brakes. So they're using cheap caliper brakes like you would find on, I don't know, a kid's bike from the early 1990s, except that bike is stopping a little kid going 5 miles an hour. Oh crap, there's a speed bump. Oh my God, that took all my might. Ugh. Ugh. And so I've already mentioned several times that this is in fact an e-bike, and so let's talk about that. An e-bike is supposed to pedal like a normal bicycle and then also have electric assist, and so it should do both. And as you can see, there's no chain or sprockets or anything down here. The drivetrain's all inside it, and presumably everything that makes this wheel go kind of is enclosed in here, except on this thing, it is extremely difficult to pedal, very inefficient, and then when you stop pedaling, it stops almost immediately. And so let's be honest, nobody's gonna be using this as an analog bicycle. You're gonna be using electric assist because it is so hard to pedal without it, it's not even on the table. But it's a terrible e-bike too.
Yeah, so this is, again, I don't know what they've got going in that hub there, but the amount of noise coming from there, and the fact that you have to use the pedal assist, there's no other alternative. You could be halfway from here to nowhere and having to ride the bike back. That would be an absolute nightmare with this bike.
Okay, so we've been riding this as an e-bike for close to 30 seconds. I went over that bridge, there's like a little lip, like a bump. After I hit that bump, the back started making noises. Let's examine this and see if it's something that could ever be repaired.
You can't get access to it.
Yeah, listen to that. It's like there's a jump in the wheel. It's done, it's garbage. Yeah. Right? Where am I gonna get replacement parts for this thing? And all I did was ride down a bikeway and hit a little bump on a bridge. Yeah. Now, where do we even go from here?
Yeah, not only that, you can't get access to it.
So let's keep discovering how bad it is.
Yeah, so maybe you could pull a regular tire wheel apart and find out the problem, but you can't with this thing. You can't even get in. What a noise. Oh my God. Surely there's something about this bike that's good.
Guys, I had a whole video planned here. Like, I spent money on the bike and I was planning on selling it afterwards. Now it's broken. And then half the things I want to show you don't even work. It's so much worse than I thought. But it's not for lack of trying. They really tried to put a lot of good features on this. Let me show you some of them and you tell me whether this is something a bicycle needs. So check.
Here's a good point. He says for lack of trying. I think one of the areas that's severely lacking when it comes to trying is actually trying it out with real people. I mean, where's the real people who reviewed this way back when they had the prototypes? And what did they say about it? Because there doesn't appear to be an honest rendition of this bike's performance in its prototype form. And that would be a red flag for me and something to avoid. If you can't get an independent review of the product when it's supposedly going into production, then perhaps that's something to consider.
Check out the fingerprint scanner over here. You can move it left or right and it will actually put on signals. To their credit, it's good to have lighting on a bike. That's a good safety feature. Of course, you can't stop, so it doesn't really matter, but it does have signals and brake lights, and that's one of the unique things about these wheels. You can put stationary things on them because they're not spinning. So what do you think these little handle things are? These stay just like this when the bike is in motion. It's to carry a bag. They actually made a custom Revo bag, and it goes inside the wheel. That brings the center of gravity.
Right, so you've got a little tiny bag which you could put on your back as a backpack or around your waist, or put it under the saddle or a rack in any other places of the bike. You're going to put it in the wheel. I don't know why you'd want to do that. I mean, he talks about lower center of gravity. Is that really?
Center of gravity way down, and it's actually pretty freaking functional. And so if this was a good bike and I was able to ride it all the time, I would put some kind of big storage container in here.
I would.
But of course, it breaks after you hit.
So if you've ever put something heavy on the front of the bike like that, it does really interfere with your ability to ride the bike because it's, quite heavy and pulling the steering wheel around. So I don't like even that
One
feature.
bump. And so we can't do that. Now, I mentioned before the Revo has airless tires, which amount to just rubber wrapped around the wheel. But if it did have
Very
pneumatic
hard ride.
tires, if they did take air and you had to change one, I don't think you'd have to take the bike apart at all. Look at this. The wheel on the front, it's just attached on one side and it's all open over here. You can access the entire tire. And they've done the same thing on the rear. It's open right over here. So if this was a normal bike, you'd be able to air it down, use a tire lever, and just take the tire straight off. But I'm not really sure what we do here. So let me show you something on the other side of the bike. Oh, it's so heavy.
Yes.
Okay.
He's having a look at the
kickstand.
kickstand, I think. Yeah.
So they
Elegant.
call this an invisible kickstand because you flip it up and it just melds into the frame. You can't see it at all. Pretty cool styling, actually, but it's a terrible kickstand, I'm sorry to say. Now, it is pretty easy to flip down because you just push on the side of the frame and there it goes. But most kickstands, when you put the bike in motion, it goes up. This kickstand locks into place like this and kind of goes in reverse. So I find myself getting on the bike and trying to go, and then having the kickstand kind of bind up. But they actually made the wheel lock when the kickstand is engaged. So when the kickstand is up, this wheel can turn freely. When you put the kickstand down, it is locked. And I suppose that if you had the app, it would actually stay locked and not be able to flip up. I don't really know.
Well, I think the other point here is that he didn't bring this up, but often bikes have a chainstay. So that comes from where the motor is positioned out to the hub, and you mount the stand on that. And that's in a really convenient spot because as you get on the bike and the stand is still down, you can just push back with your foot or even drive off and the stand will still kick backwards. The way this is configured, it's kind of awkward to kick it back up because you have to put your leg in behind and push it up. Again, this hubless design isn't working.
No. While the engineers were testing the Revo, they must have realized how bad the ride was because they put a suspension seat post on it. Does almost nothing to make the ride better.
They don't work. I've tried them myself.
This is all brick. But as you can see, the
terrible.
seat post has a little spring in it, and when you push down on it, it gives. Kind of sucks. There are actually pretty good suspension seat posts, like the Thud Buster. This is not that. This is as cheap a suspension seat post as you can get. Now, I did show you before this cool little phone mount because the Revo is supposed to operate with an app. And they thought of putting this USB port over here, which is of course powered by the battery that makes the bike go. That's actually a really smart feature. I wish more e-bikes had that because if you have your phone mounted up here, be it horizontally or vertically, you might want to be able to charge it. I guess it would have been kind of nice if this was Type-C, but I mean, what are we really expecting at this point? So
Powerful
good thinking.
battery.
That's one good feature of the Revo.
Yeah.
And you
USB-A
can't
instead
ignore
of
the
micro.
styling. That's the Revo's killer feature, and to their credit, they did a good job here. It's really striking. It's the most unique bike I've ever reviewed, for sure. But I can't tell whether people are looking at me because of that or because it's so noisy. And so I'm gonna take it into town and park it in a couple of places, and we're gonna see what people's reactions are. All right, so we survived getting downtown. I'm walking it down the sidewalk, and I discovered something terrifying about this bike. So when you push it
really
along, the pedals move because it's just not very mechanically sound. And so if you push it fast enough, the pedals actually engage the pedal assist, and it's a chain reaction. The bike keeps going. Watch this. Okay, so you're walking your bike and you kind of jog across the street a little bit. And it kicks in. And so you might say, Seth, just turn it off. I can't turn it off. I tried holding down the power button on the battery, everything. The only way to do that is to take the battery out, but I need the keys to take it out, and I don't have the keys on me. So this thing is just a death trap.
Agreed. Not only is it really bad for him, he had to really hold that. I've had this happen to me on e-bikes where it gets away from you and you really have to hold it. And if you're not strong enough or you're out of balance, you're not a big person, that bike can just pull away from you. And he shows later on what can happen. Imagine if that bike gets away, goes onto the road, or runs into a child or a mother with a pram. I mean, it's not just a death trap for the rider, it's actually dangerous to the public.
Look at that. This happens to be the worst bicycle ever made.
Oh no!
I like the way it looks.
I wonder how fast it is.
First thing I do is put me a big seat on that thing. I can't stand in seats that go up the crack of your butt.
Both on and off camera today, I've gotten a lot of reactions from people, and most people ask, how fast does it go? People who don't know bikes, they notice that it looks crazy, but they can't quite pinpoint what it is. They're just like, that's a crazy bike, how fast does it go? And so we must consider who ordered these. I don't think it was bicycling enthusiasts. It was people who saw it and said, that thing looks cool, that thing looks awesome, maybe that price tag is worth it. And yeah, we go back to the comments and we see what those customers think now. We got ripped off, this was a scam, but really was it? Were they trying to scam people? I don't think so. So again, they ended up making this and it was delivered to some people, and most of the people who did get their Revo complained about it. They complained about the noise, they complained about all the things that I'm complaining about today. But to their credit, Revo tried to correct some of those issues. They made several batches of them and they kept trying to fix different things about them. And so I don't know what batch this is from, but the later your batch, the better the Revo. And so people are like, okay, the $6.7 million, they just ran away with that. I don't see how they could have done that because they actually produced the bike. And so there was engineering, there was tooling, there was order fulfillment. And it looks like they spent a lot on marketing and reputation management because every single article about this thing is positive. And I don't see how that could be legitimate journalism. And so for people that are saying
okay,
that
so this is one point I disagree. $6.7 million is a lot of money, a heck of a lot of money. You can do a lot of engineering and tool making, and it's a bike. You know, it's not, you know, we're trying to build an aeroplane or a rocket. I mean, it's a bike. This stuff is not hard to do. Building apps is not expensive. The sensors that are used are off the shelf. Yes, there's tooling. Tooling costs are not going to be that high. How many times have they revved this? I don't agree with his summary that they tried and that the 6.7 million was spent on engineering. I actually believe a certain amount of that funding was not appropriated properly. But I have no proof, so that's just my opinion.
people that are saying that this was a scam, that it was vaporware, that's just objectively not true. I think it was unethical. I think it was wildly irresponsible, but I don't think they were trying to scam people. I think they really thought that this was going to take off and be successful, even though it is the worst bicycle in the whole world.
Maybe we're just arguing semantics, whether it's a scam or whether it's irresponsible or unethical. I would love to be able to see how the money was spent, where that $6.7 million went. I think that would be fascinating and it would be very revealing. Also, the fact that these people are just not out there. There's no name behind this anymore. There's no people. It's as if there's a grab and run that's gone on. Again, just my opinion. Nope.
So what this bike really seems like to me is a prototype that never made it out of the prototype phase. They just started manufacturing these prototypes and sending them out to people. This is what a product would look like from a legitimate company before it goes through 3 or 4 rounds of polishing to fix all the problems. And so if you were a fly on the wall behind the scenes, what you would probably see is them just rushing it out the door, just justifying it. It's not that bad. Yeah, it's got a really bad ride, but we put that suspension seat post on it, so it's good now. Runs like a prototype. It's as easy to find replacement parts for as a prototype. Look, if you sign into...
Again, I'm not 100% in agreement with this. I think if you wanted to produce a product, you would have some responsibility to stand by the claims that they've said. I mean, they said it's the smoothest ride and it's the most innovative and so on and so on. And those things just clearly aren't true. So how somebody could ship a product which is just not meeting up to the promise, well, I guess it's unethical, like he says, and irresponsible, but maybe it's even getting a little bit worse than that. I think there's some serious, I don't know what to say, what to call it, deception, I suppose, is one of the words I'm looking for.
If you sign into a crowdfunding site and you back something, you're taking a risk, especially if it's something as experimental as this. But just disappearing and leaving all your backers in the dark, that's pretty unethical, that's pretty crappy. And so we can only hope that the makers of this bike rise from the ashes to sue me, because then they'll be revealing themselves to all the backers.
That's right. We'll find out who they are and maybe where the money went.
Is the Revo really the worst production bicycle ever made? Well, let's be objective and just go by what I've experienced today. It's loud, it's heavy. You can't turn it off, apparently. It has a terrible ride thanks to the airless tires. It's extremely difficult to pedal. You can't get replacement parts for it. The motor appears to kick on whenever it feels like, and actually, if you push it fast enough, it starts a chain reaction that just sets the bicycle in perpetual motion. Actually, I wonder what happens if we just do that and let go of it.
There we go.
Oh no.
If it hadn't hit that ridge, it might have just kept going too. Oh, well, it survived. Looks like he's able to ride it. There we go. That's
so
something.
I've spent a week now with the Revo, and it's the ultimate collector's bike. I'm not so sure I want to ghost ride this thing again. It looks insane, it's interesting, it has a story. There's a whole community of people trying to keep these things running, and it's got a whole bunch of Easter eggs, like this brown piece of tape over here. What do you suppose this is covering up? Well, you can see they color match this tape to the frame very poorly to cover up the company name. Beno, the parent company of Revo, and one could imagine that shortly after they made this mold, they realized that the project was going south and they wanted to distance their company name from it. Well, here it is out to, I don't know how many people are gonna see this video. Crowdfunding projects are risky, a lot of them fail. People know that before they go into it, but there's an ethical way to fail, and then there's just leaving all your backers in the dark, wondering what happened. And so knowing they were gonna do their backers dirty, they covered their name up with a piece of tape so that nobody would ever know.
Yeah.
Now, on the other hand, if you own a Revo and you've somehow been keeping it running, trading parts with other owners, I think that's cool. That's the kind of masochistic bike ownership that I can get behind.
Yes.
The Revo's a head turner. It's a concept bike, a prototype that somehow made it out to the public. And it is completely insane that it exists.
Yeah.
But I hope you found this video interesting. I hope you learned something, and if you didn't learn something, I hope you at least found this entertaining. Thanks for riding with me today.
Well, I hope you found that interesting. I know I sure did. It was a fascinating reveal on what Revo has done. What was perhaps an interesting idea should never have been turned into a product for people, in my opinion. And I think that's where I would like to leave you with my recommendations. Yes, you can look at the social proof, you can look at, you know, the quality of the campaign and so on and so on. But I think there's an element of, well, let's look at the common sense here. A hub wheel has been around for such a long time, and so many people have used that for such a long time that you have to question whether going in this other direction makes sense. And in no way did they make a compelling story that this was in any way better, other than putting a bag, a small bag, which could be put anywhere, at a lower center of gravity. I think just step back, common sense here is a great way to keep yourself out of trouble, and then just supplement that with some of the recommendations that I've put in the linked document. I hope you enjoyed that, and thanks for watching.